everybody, welcome to Vine Path. Vine Path is a wine club put on through Koukos Wine and Cheese, a shop in Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Mariana, I am the wine buyer there. Every month we pick a topic in the world of wine to explore. This month we're doing wines made in clay. Making wine in clay is something ancient that has existed in humanity for thousands of years. There's a reason this trend is still alive. If you notice, there's a lot of winemakers in the world that are going back to basics. We're going to explore just why. Everyone from the ancient Romans to the ancient Egyptians to the Greeks used clay at some point, and it's no coincidence. The cool thing about clay is that it's porous. It's more so than stainless steel, which has no oxygen that enters during the winemaking process, but less porous than oak. So clay can be thought as a middle ground between stainless steel and oak. Introducing some oxygen during the winemaking process is healthy for a wine, and it can be beneficial for it in the long term. But the cool thing about clay is it doesn't necessarily impart as much flavor as oak would. There are a number of benefits to clay. The light oxygen that it provides, the insulation. Clay is fantastic at keeping wine insulated, so whether it's too cold or too hot outside, the clay tempers the wine. There's some cultures that even jig the clay up, which we'll taste later, and that provides even more insulation. Clay can pull out some acidity of a wine and soften it up. The pores in the clay also accelerate the aging process of a wine, so you'll get more flavors like baked fruits or nutty flavors that are usually introduced in a wine with a little more aging. Those are called tertiary flavors. The cool thing with clay as well is that you can reuse it many times. It's actually pretty ecologically friendly, more so than other vessels. So up first we have Nekazari. This wine is from a producer called Hasi Berriak. We're in the Bay of Biscay, and this is a Chacolina. To be more specific, it's a Bizkaia Chacolina. To have this designation of origin, you have to be from a certain region and be made from certain kind of grapes. Most wines in this region are made in stainless steel. If you've ever had a Chacolina, they're all about just being crisp, vibrant, even lightly effervescent. This wine is very different. I really love wines from this region. They're always meant to be food wines. This region, it's all about amazing food. San Sebastian is in this part of the world. It's always a little interesting because the main language is Basque. It's not Spanish, so it can be a little confusing. Arcaiz Gabancho and David Sabala are the winemakers here. They wanted to experiment and make Chacolina in clay. Chacolinas are usually blends. In this case, it's Hondurabi Zuri and Hondurabi Zuri de la Tia. So Chacolinas are usually light, zesty, crisp. One thing that this definitely has is that ocean water effect. It's very almost like briny. I immediately get like toasted rye bread. You can tell that the lees were a big factor in making this because this almost smells like a beer to me. A little macadamia nut. Very fun wine. Again, I still get that almost like beer quality. It almost reminds me, in Mexico they make cheladas, which is kind of like a michelada, but when it's just lime and salt. But then the finish is all about candied citrus, so it's definitely still very refreshing. So why does this wine smell this way? These are the dead yeasts that come out during fermentation when sugar is being converted into alcohol. The byproduct is dead yeast cells. Sometimes winemakers stir the lees. In French it's called bâtonnage, and they stir that in the wine. Then a process called autolysis happens, and that's a chemical reaction between the wine and the lees, in which enzymes break down those dead yeast cells, and then amino acids are produced, and proteins and carbohydrates are released. So that's what adds that creaminess in the mouthfeel. Long story short, it adds texture to wine, and that's also what gives the smell of, in this case, toasted rye. I really like this wine because you get all those toasty notes, but it still feels fresh and almost briny. This, say no more, I just want fried seafood, and sure enough, in this part of the world they do a lot of that. I would do this with some salted fried cod. Up next is the producer I get really excited to always have. It's Aphros wine and their line Phaunus. This is their 2021 Loureiro that's been aged in amphora. This winery is in northwestern Portugal. It's actually a pioneer of biodynamic wines in Portugal. The founder is Vasco Cropt, who's also the winemaker. Him and his team are just doing really exciting things. Really low intervention. I love that it calls out that this wine is made without electricity. Vasco Cropt's background he was a woodworker and furniture maker. He's really wanted to focus in biodynamic winemaking and make stripped down wines and make wines the ancestral way. Loureiro has been aged in clay amphora that's been actually lined with beeswax. Loureiro is a white grape that is typical of northwest Iberian Peninsula, so you also see it in Spain. It's a really high acid, bright, crisp white. There's been skin contact, so this is technically an orange wine. The beeswax is usually used just to line the clay to control how porous it is. Usually when beeswax is used, they just use it the first time and then don't need to use it again. In Portugal, clay amphora are called talas. Those have been used for about 2,000 years. I think this wine is fascinating. At first, it's like really complicated and kind of hard to understand because there's a lot going on. It's kind of like a complicated movie or song that you hear that it's not until like the second or third time that you start understanding it more. I instantly get a lot of ginger, some white peppercorn, even some lemons, but not fresh lemons that have like been cut, like laid out all day. On the palate, I get this really awesome tartness that just immediately kind of wakes me up. I get some dried apricots, Meyer lemon marmalade, and there's like a light oxidative note that really reminds me of sherry. What I would pair with this is very simple. Popcorn, just something kind of simple, salty, crunchy, I think would be really nice. There's a lot going on in this wine and I just want a light snack so that I can really focus. Up next, we're going to Greece, to the Peloponnese island, the northern area of Achaia. And we'll find their Koukos winery. Koukos winery was started by brothers Panagiotis and Konstantinos Koukos. And it's a family affair. They're now joined by Konstantinos' son, Antonis. This wine is made by, it says on the label, Daphne Noir. Noir meaning black, but the actual Greek name is Daphne. Daphne means black laurel. Once this wine is fermented, it spends 6 months in the amphora. Most of the things that I read is saying that clay does not add any flavor. When I smell wines like this, I really feel like it, maybe it's power of suggestion, but I really feel like I get more earth tones and almost like just wet dirt. The nose on this is lovely. I smell like figs, black fruit, plum. There's a savory component that reminds me of sweaty black olives, some thyme. On the palate, more dark Bing cherry, maraschino cherries. This wine at first seems like it's going to be light, but the tannins really do layer up. And I totally get some like wet earth. And I really think that some amphora wines, you do get a little of that wet clay. Goes a little against what most people say of it not adding any flavor. I think it really depends on many factors. I think this is an awesome wine for people that drink a lot of Pinot Noir, that want something a little different, because this definitely has kind of a light freshness, but then with just a little dark spice that I think is delicious. I would definitely have lamb with this, or something that you would have with a lot of herbs. Roast chicken with thyme and potatoes. Next, another favorite. We're going to the country of Georgia. This is Chubini Saperavi. So we're in the region of Kakheti in Georgia, in a village called Shilda. Tornike Chubinice is the winemaker. He's in his early 30s. He's really getting a great reputation for making authentic, stripped down, natural wines in Georgia. There's evidence that Georgia has been making wine for 8,000 years. In fact, they found vessels used to make wine from the Neolithic age. The main vessel that they used made out of clay is called the qvevri. Huge clay vessels that are so big they in fact will fit a whole person, and they're usually dug underground. The digging underground is for temperature control. In fact, in 2013, UNESCO added the method of making wine in a Georgian qvevri to its list of the world's intangible cultural heritage. Georgia has so many grapes, but probably its most popular, definitely most popular red grape is Saperavi. Saperavi is actually a teinturier, which means that the pulp itself is also red, not just the skin. There's actually not that many teinturier grapes out there. Most of red wine gets its red color from the skin. Saperavi is a really exciting grape. Depending on the winemaking process, it can go from a light, high-acid wine to a really deep, tannic, intense, fruity, high-alcohol grape. On this, I immediately get that wet earth that I got from the last wine. Is it from the clay? Debatable. Black dried olives, a little tobacco, black currants. Whoa, these tannins are chunky. There's like pomegranate juice, really lovely minerality that reminds me of a wet pebble. There's like a green element that's almost like a leafy dark green. This wine is intense. It has the tannin, it still has a lot of high acidity. Say no more, I want to have this with some steak. Juicy, sanguine steak. Another thing though, amphora, qvevri, eggs, they're all slightly different shapes, but they are kind of oval. That shape is also really good for winemaking. There's a kinetic energy that flows while making wine that is really healthy. One of the reasons I really like wines aged in clay is because it adds another layer of what we call terroir. Terroir refers to a wine's sense of place. And aging it in something made out of clay that also comes from the surrounding territory takes terroir to the next level. There are some trends in the winemaking world that sometimes I think are borderline cliche. A clay vessel is not one of them. It has stood the test of time, and though we're seeing a trend of more winemakers use it, I really think it's because of all the benefits that it has for the wine.